I earlier promised a story on Commander Patterson, who was the first officer that I reported into at the hydrographic office, who had been in a mutiny on the in a submarine. Of course, historians like to tell you that there was a mutiny on an American ship. That's kind of questionable. His crew overthrew him, and they won. I don't recall what the infringement was about, but they didn't like what he was doing, and they won, so I guess they had a valid situation. Now, Ruthie Simpson told me about this. She had a brother on his submarine, and Ruthie was something else. She knew every general and every admiral in Washington, D.C., and there was a lot of them. And she was a gal some 35, 40 years old, and had followed the fleet for a great many years, and the officers' fleet, that is. But she was a great one to know. Commander Chase, my favorite officer there, he became her pal, and they went a lot of places together. And so she kept me informed of what he was doing, and well, mainly what he was doing. Anyway, Ruthie was a little devil along with everything else. So this one day, I was returning from the coffee shop, and Ruthie, I hadn't gone there with her, but I came back with her, and we was walking up the hallway, returning to our positions and where we worked. We met the hydrographer in the hallway, and he graciously spoke, because he was a gracious man. And Ruthie called him George by his first name. And George, he did the nicest, "How are you, Ruthie?" and so on. And Ruthie then said, "Admiral Bryan, I want you to shake hands with one of your best enlisted men." So I could have went through the floor and took her with me and beat hell out of her. That's how I felt about it. But he did genuinely shake hands with me. And after the shock wore off and we was walking up the hall, I told Ruthie, I said, "I don't know what the penalty is for murder, but I'm going to find out, because I'm going to strangle you." And her answer was, there's too much formality in this relationship between officers and enlisted men. I said, "Well, you tell them, will you?" On one occasion, I was told to get together all the research information I could and apply it to this project we were doing in Antarctica, the coast of Antarctica. So I had read somewhere about the equivalent of a geological field book that had been put out down there by Richard E. Bird. And I went scouting around to see if I could find it, and nobody knew anything about it. So I went down to the place where all the maps and everything was shipped out in books. And I asked the guy down there, "You ever hear of it?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I've got 15, 20 copies of it. Could I get one?" "Yeah." So he loans me this, one of the finest looking things I've ever seen. So I was putting together all this miscellaneous worthless data about the approaches to the coast there, emergency harbors and that type of thing. And somebody other came by and seen this thing, and they recognized what it was. So Commander Chase told Ruthie, the girl I'd previously been talking about, says, "Gravelly's using that book to do his work down there on the coast of Antarctica. And says, that book is a no-no. Says, you go get it from him and bring it to me." Now, he wouldn't ask me himself because he didn't want to violate protocol. To go around. So Ruthie did. And what old Bird had done when he went down there to the South Pole, the government wouldn't finance it. So, but he had gotten permission from him to solicit funds on his own. So he went to people like Firestone and Ford and all the rich people up and down the East Coast there, which is a lot of, I guess, and told them that for a donation he would name a mountain range for him, or name a bay for him, or a mountain or a lake or whatever. So they thought that was fine. So they financed his trip down there, and he put this book out. Well, early after he put it out, the Argentine government, I believe, who claimed most of Antarctica, they got a hold of one of them, and they raised particular hell. So the Navy had printed this book, but they quick like backed off and told everybody that the Navy had nothing to do with this at all, and it was a private project. But it came out officially over a hydrographic office logo, so it is in a spot of embarrassment. So at that time, they gathered up all of them they could find and ground them up. But this this distribution center down there had about 15 copies they didn't get, and that was one of the copies. So that's the end of the story on that. I'm going to tell you about some horrendous mapping mistake. Out on the international date line, 180 degrees, as you know, you could be 179 degrees west longitude and be a spot 179 degrees east longitude, and you would be 120 nautical miles between the 2 points. It's very confusing. You have to be awfully sure and careful that you put the east and west on your longitude lines. It was, when we was working worldwide, it was a very critical thing and an easy thing to make a mistake. Somebody other drafted a set of islands on up. I don't know where they were now, but they put them on at 178 degrees 30 minutes west longitude. I'm speaking now. All this is Greenwich longitude, and the thing went to press with those islands. It would be the difference between going to be 120 and plus. Plus half of 120 plus 60, it'd be 180 miles out of position if this bunch of islands was put in, and just as big as could be, and nobody caught it. And the proofreaders on the topography and islands and all that went right through, and they didn't catch it. I may have told you this story before somewhere in these tapes, but there was a period of time that I run a blank tape there, thinking I was recording when I wasn't. Thanks to the Japanese, I got to blame somebody. It may as well be them. So I will repeat it and try to be as careful as I was the other time in case it is a duplication. But then at my age, one is allowed to repeat yourself. So here it goes. We were directed to make a big training map for the aviation cadets, and it would reach from Pensacola, Florida to Brunswick, Maine. We'll cover all the coastal naval installations, anywhere they had cadets training. So the battleship admirals, I suppose, determined what it would be. So they said it would be on a Mercator projection, which is the only way they could think. So we drew a line from between Brunswick and Pensacola, measured off either side to determine our limits. That was determined by the size of the presses again. So we went ahead and made this map. It was a gigantic map, and turned at an angle. It was not on true north, which is, I don't ever remember very many naval maps that was ever put out that way, but this is one. So they printed it on in beautiful colors, and the magnetic variation on it had been prescribed by an old water engineer from out in Colorado country. And he was not an educated man. He was kind of self-taught. He knew how to run irrigation ditches and section lines, and that was about it. But he prescribed the variation on it. It was his job to do so. So he knew that Denver, Colorado, for instance, was about 14 degrees east. Apply that old east is least, west is best thing, and you got your thinking right on this description. So he wasn't aware that there was a zero line ran roughly from Pensacola, from Jacksonville to Chicago. And on the east side of that variation will be westerly. On the west side it'll be easterly. So Pensacola being down at the not too far from a zero line, he of course when he put the variation on, he labeled it, continued to label it like he always had out here, 1, 2, 3 east. So that goes all the way up to Brunswick, Maine, which is 22 degrees west.
but he had it labeled east, and that makes 44 degrees of error. If you took a protractor and determined a magnetic course from Brunswick to anywhere, it would have been 44 degrees off. You can imagine the disastrous results of that. Well, anyway, it is put into use, and nothing said for about a couple of months, and all hell breaks loose. Some bright young cadet in Pensacola tells his instructor this map is wrong. The instructor rebuked him, at which time he told him it couldn't be wrong. It's put out by the hydrographic office. And anyway, they examined it, and it was indeed wrong. So they raised a little bit of hell about it. So we went to determine what, we recalled all of them, all the maps was out, see what we could do to and get them back in good stead. It cost too much money and take too much time to do it over and print it over. It was on that good paper besides. So we decided to make a great big blue block and block out the values of the isogonic lines and put the correct ones on. So it was the most horrible looking map that you ever seen in your life, and just as well, I don't think anybody cared to use it anyway. But I don't think that they ever got through pointing the finger of blame. You know, whether to blame the proofreader or blame the guy who put it down there. So I guess they blamed them both. I put out another map one time, was an aviation map covering the Pacific Northwest. And Nia Bay, Washington, which was a Navy-operated Adcock radio range, four-legged range. And you, in plotting those, you turn your protractor and you plot them magnetic. Now, these were not turned, so they were plotted true, showing the radio range legs going out true. And they were, accordingly, were 22 degrees thereabouts. Nia Bay, Washington, would be about 22 degrees east variation. So they were about 22 degrees out. But we caught that before any damage was done. My biggest claim to fame of making errors was put out a graphic scale on the bottom of a map and drafted up nicely and spelt, I wanted to put statute miles down. I spelled it S-T-A-T-U-E. That went over pretty big. I was very proud of it. Two of the draftsmen working along one night along about 2 o'clock. Things was kind of dull. It was in the summertime and very hot, and didn't have air conditioning those times. So the screen got off or something, and in flew a great big bug about a ½ inch long, and he lit on this draftsman's desk, folded his wings and sat there a little while, and the draftsman, he looked at that, and we were drafting on acetate with acid-base inks, and acid-base inks have heat. It was nitric acid. So it was strong enough to etch into the surface of the acetate. So in order to keep the acetate from tearing, they were cut on the bias, so you couldn't so readily tear them. So he got the bright idea. In the meantime, this old bug crawled over on his drawing a little bit, and he called 2 or 3 of the fellows around and said, "Hey, come here, look at this." So everybody gathered around him goofing off, and he reaches over and takes his crow quill pen, loads it with acid ink, put a little drop on the old bug's wings up where they hinge onto this body. So nothing happened for 15 or 20 seconds, and then the old bug, he kind of stretches one leg and then stretches another, and it's getting a little warm, and he don't know why. So this draftsman, he put another little dab on there, and pretty soon he had an enormous glob of red acid ink on top of this bug. So he said, now watch him now, he's going to take off. Now he took off all right, but he rolled. Went right up through the middle of that map with a great big swash of red acid ink completely ruined that strip of drawing. So I had to take it back to the lithographers and have them mask out that part, re-blue line the thing, and he had to redraft and put him about a week behind. So that was a pretty good lesson in physics there. I had a better one not too long after that. Had these visitors in there, and we were instructed, and ranking people come through, obviously concerned people about some particular problem or something. Is acknowledge them and stand back and let them in, let them have access to your table so they can look at the thing you're working on. So I was working on this big map. I don't recall the title or anything, but that particular job was being done on zinc plate, which had Duco paint on it. It was a fine drafting surface, a pleasure to draft on. So this 2 or 3 of these high-ranking naval officers walked up to this table, so I stood afar and let them at it. And this one captain, he takes exception to something's on there, and he says, now this ought to be like this. And he reaches in his pocket, he takes out a government issue red pencil. So he twists the lead down in this, and it was red, and he went to marking on that. I was standing there cringing. So he marked that thing up real good, and it looked like a slaughterhouse. So they all gone their way, and pretty soon my commanding officer come in. He said, what them people want? I guess he seen the mad expression on my face. So he come over and said, what did they tell you? So he didn't tell me nothing, but look what they did to the map. Well, he about went through the ceiling. He says, where were you? I said, standing right there. He said, why didn't you tell him to stop? I said, sir, have you ever been an enlisted man? You don't tell them kind of people to stop nothing. So he chuckled a little and went on his way. We had to take that one and take it to the paint shop and have it resprayed to get rid of his red. You couldn't erase it. And redraft it. So that was a good lesson in physics, I guess you'd say. The aforementioned Commander Patterson, the submariner, sent his secretary around one day to me and said, I would like to ask you something confidentially for Commander Patterson. All right? Says, he wants to know if you know anywhere that you can get some whiskey. I said, them kind of people asking us kind of people where to get whiskey. He said, well, he's exhausted all his sources, and he needs a case of whiskey. So I'd been associated with old George Shaw long enough to know where the liquor stores were pretty good. So I phoned up, and old boy said he had a case of cheap whiskey there made out of potatoes or something that he'd sell for about $65. So I sent this gal word, and she tells the commander. So at his suggestion, he says, instead of your usual transportation, how about riding with us down to southeast Washington, where this liquor store was, and we'll get the whiskey down there. So that's fine. So I go out and rode with him and his girlfriend down there, and made me mad because when I go in, he gave me the money to go in and buy it. He sends her with me. Ain't nothing like being trusted. So she goes in and sees me make the exchange of money for whiskey. So he come back out, gave me his keys, unlocked the back of his trunk in his car, put the whiskey in there, gave him back the keys. He said thanks and drove off, left me stranded there, the son of a bitch. So that was another experience in futility. With the advent of the Naval Air Transport Service and the amount of flying that they were going to do and anticipated doing, they realized that they had to have a little bit different kind of charts out there. Maps to geologists, charts to others. I've been in both playpens, so I'm liable to call them one or else the other, but everybody concerned will know which I'm talking about. So we decided upon making a so-called Pacific Airways plotting series, and that would show the picket boats between over wide ocean areas, like between San Francisco and Hawaii. There would be 4. They would circle in 5-mile circles. They had survival gear and radio operators, all that kind of personnel aboard. They also had a Homer beacon, so they could rescue you at sea. You could land alongside them and have a pretty good chance. But I want to point out that this probably was one of the busiest passages that you could dream of. Would be from San Francisco to Honolulu. A great circle course. They went to flying, doing their great circle course type navigation, because when they started they didn't have proper maps, and they later put these picket boats in, so they had to have something. So we put out this series, and I edited all the radio that went on it, and that was all the navigation type radio that went on it, plus a few commercial stations in Hawaii, which they could home on in an emergency. The Navy contracted with the Douglas Company for 100 C-54s, regular designation. Navy designation was R-5Ds. So accordingly, DC-3 was an R-4D to the Navy. They don't never seem to be content to let things alone that seem to be working all right. They've got to change something. So they sent enough mechanics and people of that type to Douglas to go to school that they knowed how to maintain them. And they did awful good maintenance. They flew that Pacific routes there absolutely all over it. There was about a dozen or more of these Pacific Airways plotting sheets, which covered the whole Pacific. As fast as they would secure a place, we would map it. Oftentimes the Corps of Engineers would put a radio range in their homing beacon or something if it justified it. As the war advanced, some of these situations out there were pretty interesting. Peleliu is one that comes to mind. Jarheads was fighting on one end of the island, and Navy pilots was flying instrument into the other end. That's how fast they got the instrument facilities in there. About that time, some R-5D out there someplace or other was shot up pretty badly by our own people. So something had to be done about it. So we made a poster that went on the pilot's compartment bulkhead, the doorway as you enter. This showed a beautiful, well-chested, dark maiden there, and the caption below it, well, she was posed, as you can imagine, with her chest sticking out, says, "Turn on your IFF so your pips will show." Well, I was rooming with Chester Nimitz's radio man. So he took one of them things and put it in Chester's flag airplane. So he said that you could have heard him laugh for half a mile when he first seen that. Real old Chester. I'll tell you a great deal more about Chester and a little further on. I'm about to get ahead of my story here a little bit. But the identification radar came about, so you had a responder on your airplane, and if the ground people sighted you in, this responder would click back at them and would allow them to know that it was a friend. So that was the IFF, Identification Friend or Foe bit. So one day at the hydrographic office, the commanding officer sent for me, and I went to see what he wanted. He said that we weren't able out of Washington to put these sheets out fast enough for him. So he wanted to send them to the Air Navigation Office at Rogers Field, Naval Air Station, Honolulu. Said the people out there objected about how overworked they were with their chores that they were doing, and that had to have somebody to go out there to take care of these, keep them up to date, keep them printed, and the whole works. So he sent myself. He told me that before you go out there, he says, I want you to take the chief's examination, because you'll take it and no doubt pass it. And then we will, won't be able to promote you here, but we will when we get you out there and you get settled and get going. He tells me that what date he wanted me to leave on, and he said, I want you to take with you all the originals on that Pacific Airways plotting series. He said, we'll put it in a courier canister. And he said, I want you to be a courier. He said, now there's going to be a little problem with that. That an enlisted man cannot be a courier. But he said, I'm going to write a letter which you will keep with you at all times, and when you get questioned, pull this letter on them. So I gets on a VR-3 airplane, which is the regular flights. They ran just exactly like the airlines, flights all over the country here. So we left Washington, went by way of Cleveland, Ohio, Memphis, Tennessee, Olathe, Kansas, Oklahoma City, Phoenix, San Diego, Los Angeles, and up to San Francisco. So at Olathe, I believe it was, I was questioned what authority did I have to carry them courier bag with me, and I showed them right fast. No, nothing more said about it. And I got to San Francisco. I had to wait there about 4 days to get transportation out to Hawaii. And I had to have them locked up at Naval District Headquarters. So in due time, I had to call in each day from the hotel, and they finally told me tonight's the night. So I went over, gathered up my map originals, and went down to Alameda. And I went on a PB-4Y Coronado flying boat trip to Hawaii. And it was quite a miserable, noisy trip. All blacked out, of course. And they had 5 or 6 officer passengers sitting in the compartment up front, eating up all the chow. And there's 3 or 4 enlisted men sitting back with the cargo. And the cargo being a small ship propeller. It wasn't so small, it was big to the point that they had to take a section of the airplane out in order to put this thing in. So they had it down there. It's very heavy. So they backed up there about to the Golden Gate Bridge and made a run at it. I began to think they were had decided to go surface instead of fly. They finally got that big groaning lumbering thing up in the air, and off we went. And headwinds, I guess. I don't know what, but it took us 13 hours to go out there. And didn't have anything to eat. The flight steward was handshaking the officers up front, so they ate bacon and eggs. And about the time we get about an hour out of Hawaii, he gives the enlisted men a can of pineapple juice. So, say again, that was a cold, miserable trip. So I landed at the seaplane base, which was at Rogers Field, adjacent to the land plane base. And I turned over my maps to the proper authority, and I had to check through with the procedure there, and it took me about 4 days to get back to my duty assignment. So I went from there to the Ford Island. Ford, as you know, was the around which all the big ships was anchored. It was sunk. And I never saw so much anchor chain in my life. I didn't know it had ever been that much made. Every road, every street, everything around there piled several feet high with anchor chain. I guess the first thing he did when they salvaged the ship was try to get the anchor chain out. So they got her out and drug her along them roads there just to store it. He had a 2-lane highway between the piles of it. So they were raising the California. They had the upper part, foretop, I guess, was about all they had out. They moved a crew of white hats in there to chip and paint as they pumped this thing up out of the water. So they kept floating her up. And by the time they got to the bottom of it, they had all the dead people out of it and had it all painted and ready to take somewhere and have the engines fixed up on it, get it back in the water, which they did. Made good time on it. So I was sleeping in a hangar down there, which they said had 2,000 people in it. I never counted them, but there sure was a lot of people there. And I stayed there a couple of days. And I went over to the dock there and looked at some of the ships that had come in. It had holes in them big enough to stick my house through, looked like. And I got tired of waiting on the red tape as necessary around there, and I almost got shanghaied onto a crew there, which would have been all right. I wouldn't have objected to it. They was making up a crew for some depleted ship there that had been repaired and ready to go again. And I gave a whole lot of thought towards it, and they asked me to go, and then I got thinking about my responsibility to Chase, and I decided I best not ought to side-slip him like that. So I go on about my business. I was on an interesting working party there. There's a cargo ship come in that was loaded with goodies for the various officer clubs around there, and he had a fair cargo of whiskey, and we kind of made a bucket brigade type of a unloading operation there. So they'd take a case of whiskey and pass it man to man to man. The line was fairly long. It was a difficult place to get the vehicle down to. So crowded and so on. So we, 200 or 300 of us, I guess, unloaded all this ship. And when they made their inventory, would you believe it? There was a case of whiskey missing. You would have thought it was a warship. They never did find it. Wonder why. I heard a little giggling around the hangar that night where the 2,000 people were sleeping. So then I went on over to where I was supposed to go as soon as I got orders out of Fort Island. And while I was there, I run into a little sailor there. He was doing a lot of map sketching and stuff, and I asked him what his interest was in that, and he told me. It was a sad story, but a good one. He had been on some black gang on some ship, and he ran into somebody, some destroyer sailor from his hometown. So kid-like, he rigged up a code which he wanted to send his brother so he could tell his brother where he was. And this eager beaver on the destroyer, he turned it into his ship. Turned this poor boy in. So they court-martialed him, and they sent him to the Marine prison there on Oahu. And I guess he had it tough. They gave him a year, and he was just getting assigned. And I didn't know, but they send them back to the same organization that they come from, unless somebody intercedes for them and wants them. So I talked to him a little bit, and he's so sincere and everything, and so repentant. So he'd be going back to the same organization, had an apprentice seaman, same as he'd been when he went in the Navy, and that having served that prison term. So I got over to my duty assignment, and I found Commander Ed Greer was the commander of it. And I was talking to him about the maps there. And I asked him would he be interested in having another good map draftsman, and I believe I'd found a kid would make a good one. I told him his circumstance. He says, that sounds good. So he gets on the phone, he calls somebody in personnel, and they had this guy's name was Newick. They had him over there in about 5 or 6 hours. So, boy, was he gracious. He was plumb gratified. So he turned into a real good draftsman real fast. And so we started work on keeping up these sheets, maps that I'd taken out there. And one day, some wheel from Airpac came in there and told a story about 2 airplanes flying across a great circle course there while they're supposed to be 1,000 feet separation, direction, odd and even bit. That they broke out of a cloud bank and then looking at each other eyeball to eyeball. Both took evasive action, both happened to be awake, and narrowly missed each other. So Greer called me in and says, let's you and me lay out a system of civil airways across that ocean there, and just figure as to how to control it, and we'll cause the Oceanic Air Traffic Control to send people, separate them, send some planes to Jones's Corner, which is an imaginary latitude and longitude up there someplace, and others here, and some of them we'd bring in as far away as Hilo, and then come up the coast to Oahu. And we split it up into about 6 or 8 different streams up and across there. So I went up to Schofield Barracks. The 29th Engineering Battalion was up there, and they did our printing. They had 4 colored printing presses. They all lived underground in an old, it had been designed for, in the early part of the war, for an aircraft factory, and assembly factory, that is. They thought that the Japs were going to invade the west coast of the U.S. and that they might have to make airplanes out there and assemble them anyway. So this is a unique thing under the pineapple fields up there above Schofield Barracks. It also was Joint Intelligence Pacific Ocean Area. General Vandergrift's headquarters was there. And these enlisted men in 29th Topo Battalion there all had to live together and stay together. They'd let them out of that hole in the ground about once a month. They went to town, there'd be 1 officer and 10 men. He with you all the time. He'd tell you when it's time to stop drinking. They were very security conscious, and they were printing all the invasion stuff for all the big movements in the Pacific. So I got fairly well acquainted with 2 or 3 people out there that we did our business with, and they printed our maps and did a good job. So we went ahead and distributed them maps, all them civil airways on. Everybody was flying them and thinking it was a real good system, and all of a sudden Washington went to raising heck. Says, where'd you people get them airways? So Greer, he laughed a little bit. He says, I ain't even answer him. He gets another stern letter from some big commander-in-chief back there of something or other, saying, please explain. So He sat down and wrote him a letter and told him he thought it was necessary. And he got by with it. He's quite a guy, this guy Greer was. He borrows a Jeep from the some army outfit around there somewhere. It had one that wasn't using it. It was nearly a new one. I don't know how it had escaped. When he borrowed it, and he'd had it about 2 or 3 months, and he called me one day and said, "I want you to do something for me." I said, "What?" I said, "I want you to go over and have a new set of numbers painted on that Jeep." I said, "What'd you do, steal it?" He said, "Well, you just go have the numbers put on." So I went over and had a new set of numbers put on it. So a few days later, some officer from the Army showed up there and just wanted to get our Jeep. He said, "What Jeep?" And he says, "Well, Jeep you borrowed way back." "Oh," he said, "didn't you get that and turned it in a long time ago?" "Well, what have you got?" "Oh, I don't have your Jeep." I said, "I don't believe it. There's something wrong here," this guy tells him. He said, "Well," he says, here's the numbers on my Jeep." He says, "It's sitting right out there in the parking lot. Go look at it." I don't know if that was thievery or not. The established organization out at the air station, air navigation people who I had joined, had a favorite, one of theirs, a guy named Carl Swanson, who had been a good friend of mine. He was a first-class petty officer, and I guess I never realized how petty he was till this incident came about. But they put him up for promotion to chief petty officer, and the squadron, Naval Air Transport Squadron 12, gave the test. So there wasn't any way they could rig it. So Swanson goes up, takes the test, and didn't pass it. So that tore him up right smartly down there. So the squadron then informed them that they had a man in the organization which was qualified, and that was myself. And that I should be given the job. So Chase had told me before I left Washington that I'd taken the test, passed it, and was qualified. So they didn't have much of any choice but to give it to me. I didn't know how much opposition I had till the executive officer came and told me that I had been promoted to chief petty officer. And I didn't like this guy very good, and he obviously didn't like me. His name was Ray Dew. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and I wasn't one of his favorites at all. He wanted somebody who went out with the original group to have the job, and that's beside the point. The point was that I got it. So when he told me the news, he said, "I want you to understand that I was opposed to it." At which time I told him, I says, "I appreciate your confidence. Thank you very much." And I guess I told him one way or the other. So I became a chief petty officer, and Swanson never would speak to me again, and half the others wouldn't know when they had to. They finally came around when I'd done a few things for them. But I oughtn't to ever say anything about the Irish Mafia. That was one that's just as bad. The leading chief was 23 years old, I guess, slick arm. He retired as vice president of Kistler's here in Denver, and I've seen him a half a dozen times in 45, 50 years that I've been here. So he and I, we just kind of declared a truce and didn't have much to do with each other. One time we roomed together. That was a thing of convenience. The sure didn't have any friendship merit. He was a little jerk and showed it every time he had a chance. One day there was a ball game going on, which wasn't too many ball games went on out there, so they decided that the hands could go. So Jarvis goes around and he tells everybody except the Jews and the Italian boys to go to the ball game. He tells me, "You got to stay here with them." So I got to thinking about that a little bit evil. And the minute that they got over there and the ball game got underway, I goes around and tells these guys, shove off, go over there and go to the ball game if you want to. So they showed up over there to the ball game, and old Jarvis, he didn't like that none at all. So he was telling me what a bad thing I'd done there, and I told him what a bad thing he'd done. That you couldn't show your prejudices in the manner which he had done. So I got a pretty good joke on all of them. The officers was out down to the beach swimming. They didn't go to the ball game. It's just mainly enlisted men. So every one of the officers is gone. So I'm there alone, and in walks the base commander, who was Commodore Ingalls, who was Herbert Hoover's Secretary of the Navy. And Ingalls and Captain Tomlinson, who was over the seaplane part of Nats, and some visiting Rear Admiral walks in. So I done the necessaries, stood up and spoke, and he, at which time the Commodore says, "Where is your commander?" I thought a minute, and I decided I better tell him the truth. He says, "He's at the beach, sir." "Where's the executive officer?" "He is with him, sir." "All the officers there?" "Yes, sir." So he said, "Ask your commanding officer to report to me when he gets back," which I did. I don't know what took place, but I expect he got eat out a little bit. We all do from time to time, so I don't guess it hurt him much. So that was the some of the goings-ons there. When I became a chief petty officer, the station chiefs, there's several hundred of them. I don't know how many, 500 or 600, I guess. It's a big station. So I go to the chief club and tell them I'm a new chief. I want to be admitted there as a member, which they did readily. So then, as part of the hazing procedure, I had to wait till I'm going to make an attempt to erase some of the tape. This is purely for the testing mode that I'm in. I almost said mood. I'm not in much of a mood to mess around with this Japanese machine. I didn't understand them any better then than I do now. But some of the things I earlier said might be construed as being extreme racist. All I'm trying to do is just be plain racist where the Japs are concerned. I do see at this time that we're looking at them pretty good in the automobile industry, so maybe we'll keep on. Many sources of employment. In fact, it was just about nil. There was a tannery in Bavard owned by Silverstein. There was a tannery in Rossman, 10 miles away, owned by Silverstein. Silverstein also owned the sawmill in Rossman, Big Barn sawmill, owned a tanning extract plant, which they ground up chestnut wood and tan bark off of Spanish oaks, off of chestnut oaks, and they shipped that to various tanneries throughout the country to tan leather with. So the main industry around there was supplying wood that they might grind up and boil out or whatever and send to their customers. So to start off with, the mountain people there thought that was about the greatest thing that come along in a long time. And by the time, 25 years later, when I became a young man, it still was the main industry. Even the town of Rossman, their electric system was dependent upon the sawmill and the extract plant. And when we had both of them going at the same time, the lights had to be cut off in town. A little bit convenient. Big kerosene lamps, barely. So it wouldn't be in the middle of a school entertainment or something of that nature. All of a sudden, the power go off. So that was quite modern. So all the refuse out of these plants, they dumped into the river and polluted the French Broad River all the way to Cairo, all the way to the Gulf Coast. But killed all the fish. And later, in recent years, after OSHA came into being, they made them clean the river up. So their answer to that was to go out of business. But in the meantime, there was a period of about 50 years there that Silverstein controlled the county. He went for the night, he became chairman of the county commissioners. He wanted it all. He was the most arrogant little Hebrew fellow that you ever seen. He was about 5 feet tall and wore a goatee, and he had a major domo, I guess you'd call him, who was another one who was more arrogant than he was. And had a guy there named Bird who married Silverstein's daughter. He was a pretty nice guy. He was a Norwegian and could barely talk English. And he had been in the merchant marine, Norwegian merchant marine during the First World War. So knew how to run ships. So after spending a lifetime down there just about, and World War II came along, he went into the merchant marine service of this country. And he advanced very rapidly because of his knowledge of ships, and he became the captain on the Gripsholm, as you'll well recall, was the exchange ship, the diplomatic exchange ship at the end of World War II. And his wife, who decided that she would go with him, so she lived aboard the ship with him. And he followed that for the remainder of his active life, and then he retired in Bavard there, and he passed away. And there was no other Silverstein heirs except Mrs. Bird. So she gave the Silvermont mansion and all of it. There. So back to my humble beginnings there. When there not being any jobs, the only thing I could do when I got out of high school, except when I was working on the farm, was to work for Gloucester Lumber Company. So I'd work through their subcontractors and cut chestnut wood. You cut it. This Silverstein insisted that it be cut into 5-foot lengths. And a cord, as you know, is 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet, but his cord is 5 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet. So he gained a good chunk of percentage on you there. So we paid a miserable fee for the cutting of this wood. It'd take a 3-man crew, 2 men sawing the blocks off the tree, if you got the tree down, and 1 man splitting and trimming. A good splitter could keep up with the sawyers, because chestnuts split pretty easy. But they were huge, big trees. All of them were dead, been killed with the Japanese blight. The Japs was even done it to us way back then. They managed to kill all the chestnut forest all over the east. And to date, they've never returned. There is, however, recently some Forest Service official down there is experimenting with a Chinese chestnut, which is blight resistant, and they're mixing them with some old stock they managed to salvage some way. These sprouts come up from some of the old dead chestnuts. So he bred up a pretty good bunch, and they're planting them down there now, and they think it'll overcome the effects of the blight. What it was is about similar to the thing that killed the pines in this country here. The beetle carried a fungus which cut off the circulation, killed the trees. Then the worms took over. So that's where your wormy chestnut come from, which is so prized to frame pictures with, do paneling. But the part that I took care of wasn't very prized. But I did get to see before, in my early life, I got to see the chestnuts before they were all killed with this blight. You see an entire mountainside by about the middle of August, and a yellowish haze from the blooms of the chestnut. Honeybees loved it, and the chestnuts would fall on the ground, and back in those times, everybody's hogs ran wild, so they'd get real fat off eating these chestnuts. And the forest firefighting people didn't like them very much because a chestnut bird catch on fire and roll down a hill and redistribute the fire. So these were remarkable trees, and some of the biggest trees that I've ever had the privilege of seeing. The biggest tree that I ever helped cut down was about 7 feet. And you was using 6-foot crosscut saws, so that'd give a little problem there. So what you do, you would corner saw as long as you could. You saw in and then go around 45 degrees and cut in a little bit further and so on. You had to cut a big notch in the front to Frelick, where you wish to be. And then the final cutting of the tree, you took one handle off and one man would saw the thing down. So that's the way you got by using a 6-foot saw on a 7-foot tree. And the saw was real standard, and there's very few 7-foot trees. So we cut down one day, and this was 3 miles from our house. And my mother told me that she heard the tree fall at great distance. It went crashing down off that mountainside, and it tore down every other tree there was around there getting down. And it had truckload after truckload of wood went off of that one there. And then most of them were a lot nicer trees than some of the old, aged old ones. There's old pieces of bark laying around there, which be about like the redwoods or something, I guess. Bark must have been 3 inches thick on them. But the chestnut wood industry is what kept the people alive, if you call it keeping alive. You'd work on that job. I made $1.50 a day for 10 hours. You go on Saturday to receive your pay, and you had to take your pay out of the company store. And Mr. Silverstein had seen fit to raise the prices about 33%, I guess, on everything. So you had to buy that and pay those horrible prices. So you'd work all week and get a few dollars worth of groceries that you could carry in one sack. There's no difficulty at all. And then you'd hitchhike home on a logging truck. And half the time it'd be raining, so it was pretty, no wonder to me sometimes that my neck and arms hurt. There's a reason for it. It ain't all drafting either. So the Silverstein industry there, you could almost tell a man who worked on the railroad. They ran railroads into narrow gauge, 30-engine type railroads into the boondocks. And you could almost spot a man that worked on that, because he'd have his fingers would be cut off or something like that from the log loaders. They had cable disasters after cable disasters. And there was no insurance or anything. The poor guy got his fingers hand cut off while you had a problem. You had to live with it. So it was quite an adventure back on these railroads, little old logging huts where the camps were alongside the railroads, and these housewives would come out, and the train would be trucking through with 20 or 30 cars of logs, and she would take a forked stick or split a stick and stick her grocery list in the end of that, and the train would be coming by sometime maybe wide open, maybe 25, 30 miles an hour, which was wide open for them unless they were running away. So the engineer would reach down and take her grocery note, and then come when they next came back, 1 day, 2 days, or whenever, they would bring the groceries to them. I don't guess it was a very heavy load. So that was pretty well the railroad story. My boyhood friend and my buddy in school, Ralph Galloway, and myself, we one night went on that railroad, and we just wanted to take a little ride there, so the section crew had left a hand car off on a siding there somewhere, so we pushed and lifted and heaved and finally got that blame thing out on the railroad track. So we went to let it get away from us and went down the hill there real fast, too fast to jump off. So old Ralph says, well, there's a hill coming up there, so we'll jump off and it slows down going up that hill, which we did. So no sooner he gets off that thing, we hear the train coming away off down a mile or two away, his horn blows, whistle blowed on it. So I never heard I never heard what happened, but I'm sure that the railroad train hit that handcar head on. It wouldn't have made much difference, I guess. But there would be all kinds of runaways on the rails there. These heavy trains get on top of the mountain there, and some go bad with the brakes, and off it'd go. So they know they're going to tumble off into the river there, so the train crew would all bail out on some hilltop where the thing slowed down going across a hill. And quite an interesting railroad engine to show you was. It drove from the outside. It had the drive shafts was on the outside, not down the center as you would normally expect it to be. And they burned wood or coal or anything, I guess, would burn in them. I don't know if they never converted to oil down there because oil was too scarce. It would have had to been kerosene, I guess. But the railroads, as the time went on, they pulled them up and sold them for junk. And trucks took over about then. Trucks is pretty good. So any operations I worked for was mainly trucks. So we would cut both the hardwood and the chestnut wood. The hardwood was hauled to the sawmill in log form, and the other was split. You had to split it, the chestnut, which I previously talked about, because it would be so heavy, you couldn't handle it unless you split it and let it dry up. So one day, my buddy and I was cutting down this big tree, and he looked up and here's the woods boss. Nobody ever knowed him to be out of his office. It was just a title mainly. But here's Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris says, I wish you boys would cut that a little bit closer to the ground. I said, how close? Oh, about 3 inches. Well, on a hillside, that's awful uncomfortable. Well, we went to cutting it 3 inches above the ground. So that, as the years went on there, I worked for different ones. I worked for a guy named Burley Head. And he was a pretty good old boy. He and another guy